I'm George Mafidon. I studied mechanical engineering and programming at University College London. And upon graduating, I'm now the CEO at Motives, which helps young people access jobs in STEM. And I'm a performance engineer for Sir Lewis Hamilton's race team, X44.
Hi, my name is Victor Zubike. I grew up in North London, in the borough of Islington. I went to secondary school in St. Aloysius, where I did my GCSEs. And then I went to the Warwick University, where I did politics and international relations. After that, upon graduation, I went to JP Morgan, where I worked for 3 years as a market sales analyst.
Hi, I'm Atiya. I'm a recent graduate from Imperial College. I studied civil and environmental engineering. I shall be joining McKinsey as a business analyst in October.
My name is Esther, and I studied human geography as an undergraduate at the University of Leicester. Post-undergrad, I went on to the University of Oxford to study a Master's in African Studies. Since then, I've been working for one of China's largest education technology companies as a learning consultant, working with young people between the ages of 4 and 18.
Hello, my name is Isaiah Wellington Lynn. I studied anthropology at university. I went to Harvard and UCL for undergrad, and I will be starting a PhD at Oxford.
My name is Wilfred Obeng. I am currently a CTO and co-founder at AudioMob, which is a company which is around bringing non-intrusive advertising into gaming. Before that, I was in banking. So I started my career in JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, but I studied computer science. So I was in the technology divisions. And going on from that, I was working at Google in the Google Cloud team.
My name is Shamari Bridgewater. I'm currently a trainee solicitor at the South London Legal Partnership, where I focus on different areas of public law. I'm also a senior football coach and mentor for my local football team.
For my personal journey, leveling up means access to opportunities and an ability to improve your skills.
I think for me, leveling up is a lot to do with developing yourself and finding who you truly are. It's almost like a journey and a process, not only like gaining skills like technical and soft skills that you might need, but also growing personally, forming relationships, gaining mentorship, and I guess working towards some form of goal that you hope to achieve.
Leveling up for me means access to equal opportunities, and as well as considering the qualities of opportunities made available to, people like myself. And with that example, I mean, mentoring schemes, as including peer mentoring schemes, skill sessions, all these things that, equip you with the tools in order to be, successful, not just in your career, but tools you can, utilize in your life and that journey.
So for me, leveling up is about, first of all, recognizing where I am on the playing field and recognizing the privileges that I've been afforded due to how I show up in the world, and also looking at the, disadvantages that I have also based on how I show up in the world. So
it's probably the same term that I heard growing up in terms of social mobility. So the ability by basis of your work, by basis of your education, and by basis of your skill set, to provide a better life and a better foothold in society for yourself and your family and your loved ones.
I think when we talk about leveling up in the workplace, particularly for a Black woman like myself, we're not looking at a level playing field for, my peers from all ethnic groups and backgrounds. In terms of my psychology, I understand that I have to work harder than most of my peers. I understand that I have to sort of dim down my Blackness in a sense to navigate the workplace in order to succeed and progress and really level up within these workplaces. Then you sort of need to adopt the culture, and you can't go, against the grain. You have to go with the flow. And sometimes that tends to mean dimming down an aspect of yourself, your identity, just to succeed and make it.
So when I got to the workplace, I think there was a fundamental element of class that I saw, which meant that I had to level up in terms of my communication, in terms of the ways in which I would speak to clients, in terms of the ways in which I would send emails. So that mattered a lot.
If I was to compare it to university is probably you coming of age and you gaining understanding, whereas the workplace, I would argue, is solely based on competition. Although everyone comes together as a team, especially in the tech world, it's even, the way people progress is even described to and explained as levels. I would say it's very clear from the outset, especially in the working environment, that there is this idea of levels and where you can progress to.
So when it comes to addressing something that makes me feel rather uncomfortable, on face value, I know that there's a way to address it that can lead to growth on both sides and doesn't have to create any animosity. So I feel very empowered and confident when it comes to leveling up in the workplace.
So I was told twice as hard within the household, outside of the household. The sentiment was there. It's not necessarily to do it all the time, but just like, as, a Black young person trying to secure opportunities and, get to the next step, that I would often have to work twice as hard. I didn't necessarily see it as motivating, but there needs to be a way of telling the reality without always speaking about just, racism and institutional racism or otherwise. And I felt like that was kind of what I understood from the statement of working twice as hard, is that you're not going to be seen as, they don't value you nearly as much as they value, your white counterparts, for example. To some ways, a fact, but it's not motivating. I accepted it and very much internalized it maybe in some way because I knew that I was going up against a lot of resistance and I was just now aware of it. So I wasn't drinking the Kool-Aid. I knew that if they had a chance to pick me at an interview and someone else that had equal amount of qualifications, equal amount of energy, integrity, it's going to be an interesting one, and they're probably going to choose the other person just because that person is more palatable. So I would have to do a little bit more in order to stand out.
Using the term twice as hard is a motivational response to that idea that the game is rigged. Because when you say you need to work twice as hard to get, or you need to work 3 times as hard to get what a particular group has, you're basically saying the game is rigged. But it's a way in which you provide this motivated sense that, okay, we've accepted that the game is rigged in favor of certain people, but in order for you to get further, you need to do X, Y, Z, and you need to work at much more kind of like velocity than someone else. And I was thinking about this recently because I said I wouldn't say that to my children. When I have children, I wouldn't say that to my children. I wouldn't say that to like my younger family members, because I think with it comes potentially an assessment of inferiority. Is why do I have to work twice as hard when they don't have to work twice as hard? Is it that they're better than me naturally? And there's certain questions that come like that. And I think that inferiority in some ways is compounded by where you grow up, by sometimes your family structure. If you have both parents present, your economic status, were you on free school meals? Did you grow up in low income housing, and how that even low income housing even has physical effects, right? Asthma, hypertension, all of these things that can potentially come into play. So I don't think it's a helpful term. I understand why it was said. I think there was a level of, look, this is the cards we've been dealt. It's your job to make sure that you can make something of it, right? But I think in a quest for leveling up and a more equitable society, I think those statements need to be examined a lot more thoroughly and a lot more carefully to make sure that we do provide a better context for everyone. Because I wouldn't like to participate in a society where we say to a certain group of people, you have to work twice as hard or 3 times as hard in order to achieve something that doesn't take the same amount of effort for another group, because that's woefully unacceptable and unhelpful and can breed toxic notions and potentially discontent between groups, which doesn't help the culture and doesn't help the diversity that we have managed to achieve, and we should celebrate and preserve.
So for me, it very much started off with an assessment of myself and what I was good at and maybe not so good at. So the strengths and the weaknesses. through Luminous Spark, which was the psychometric tool being used at the time. And just through having that and then setting smart goals with the coaches, I could now take the environment that I was in and completely start dreaming again, because there was a lot of limitations growing up in Peckham. But now I kind of looked at, okay, cool, this is what I do have, and this is what might be not so good. So I might not be as an effective communicator just yet. I might not have the language. I might not be as succinct. I might not be as empathetic, and all of these things, and understanding, okay, so now what are the goals that I need to do or like set in order to actually achieve some of these things and level up in the area of just myself, being more confident and actually getting the skills. And I feel like coaching allowed me to become aware of that, be aware of my gaps, my blind spots that just no one told me before, no one could help me with. And I think it was very empowering because I realized that I had it all within me and I just needed someone to essentially help me bring that out. And, you know, fortunate enough to have you two, Joy and Atiya, to actually support me on that process. I feel like from 2014 up until now, that has probably been the single thing that has allowed me to say, okay, cool, I deserve these opportunities because I know what I have. And now I just need to find a way to build up my credibility to access those opportunities. And that's what many of my peers didn't have. And I felt like that is what gave me the unfair advantage. Because as soon as I knew that, I could then just start preparing in a way that others couldn't.
The coaching word comes into my life is fundamentally you two. So I think on the basis of you two, you definitely provided me with not just the confidence, but the repetition. Repetition, I think, is the most important thing. Is practice is permanent, as Joy would always say. So that's one of the things that I always take into account. I just take into account the fact that I need to work diligently at it. And the weird thing, or the magical thing about it, I should say, is the fact that when you do practice, when you do make it permanent, you become more self-confident in your skills and your abilities. And then that manifests itself in other places where you kind of adopt this growth mindset, as you said earlier. And it's like, there's nothing that if I put myself to, I'm not able to learn. It might take longer. It might not necessarily happen tomorrow, but if I apply myself, I can potentially pick up the key principles that will help me learn. And I think coaching is very, very important for that, because I think if I was left to my own devices at that age, I would have the enthusiasm, but I wouldn't necessarily have the understanding, or I wouldn't have been able to kind of know where to go for the information. Wouldn't have known shortcuts. I wouldn't have been provided with potentially, and no shortcuts in the sense of like dodging things, but more so just understanding how to get there quicker, how to get there more efficiently. And I think that matters a lot of the time when you do have a lot of energy to expend.
So Lumina really made me aware of my personality and my key traits. I think I knew who I was and some behaviors I had, but it really helped me to identify and put names and specific words and behaviors to that, deciding not that I need to conform to how others behave in different situations or different arenas, but really embracing who I am and recognizing that I have really important and valuable traits to bring to the table. And then it also helped me to recognize my style under stress and understand that, okay, this is how I'm responding, this is why I'm having difficulties in certain areas, but not to see one as necessarily a negative or a positive, but an opportunity to grow and see, okay, this is where I can actually employ these behavior traits, and this actually would help me if I stepped up more in this area or did more in that area in these different scenarios. And so it was a really important tool for me for introspection, and to look at myself and say, okay, this is how I can be more comfortable in my own skin.
To answer that question, I would say that the monetary importance and all the coaching and mentoring will initially help, but I think because it's on a psychological level, I almost think time is like the biggest factor that will contribute to an actual change, because I've seen that people are slowly starting to change. And obviously, if you have a teacher, for example, that's slowly started to change, then that teacher will teach her kids or like her students in that new methodology. And so the change will slowly start to happen.
I don't want to be pessimistic and say, no, we'll never level up, or maybe we'll never level up in my lifetime. But from what I see and experience, things are changing. They're moving in a more positive trajectory, perhaps not as fast as we want them to, but people are recognizing the need for diversity, the need to celebrate people, you know, from different backgrounds, all walks of life with different abilities. That's at the forefront of like not only government agenda, but corporations, private sector. But I think one thing I've noticed with leveling up, and one thing I've come to accept, is I have a certain level of mobility in comparison to other people who look like me. And I have that because of my educational background of, you know, not only attending a university like Leicester and holding a very good degree, but coming from an institution like Oxford, I can accept that certain opportunity, I'm afforded certain opportunities because of this, you know, cultural capital I have amassed. And sometimes we have to come to terms with the fact that for many people of color, it's about access to this cultural capital and the sort of intelligence, to acquired intelligence, I would say, because everybody's intelligent, but I would say the knowledge of knowing how to navigate these spaces, whether it be filling in, you know, an application form a certain way. And I find that even with institutions, corporations, even with the government, with this agenda for diversity, their recruitment process still only allows for people from certain backgrounds to be admitted into the institution.
It has to be a holistic effort in finance, in housing, in education, sports, and all areas that affect life. And I think that's really the way it has to happen. And I'm fortunate to see people that are actively engaged in doing that in different groups and organizations I'm part of. So I'd say I'm hopeful that it can happen in the future.